If you grew up anywhere near Western Christianity, or even just Western pop culture, you know exactly what hell is supposed to look like. It's an inescapable, subterranean chamber of horrors where the wicked burn forever. For a lot of people, that specific image is the exact reason they walk away from faith entirely. It paints God as a sadistic torturer. If the end of the human story involves billions of people being actively subjected to unimaginable agony by their creator, reconciling that with a God of love becomes nearly impossible. But there is a massive problem with that underground chamber. When you look closely at the demons and torture devices in the traditional picture, you won't actually find them in the Bible. Most of the imagery we associate with eternal damnation today is an amalgamation of Greek mythology, medieval church politics, and European art. The hell we grew up fearing is a cultural caricature. To understand what Jesus was actually warning his listeners about, we have to strip away centuries of the Middle Ages and read the text with first-century eyes. The foundational assumption in the modern view of the afterlife is that every human has an immortal soul. At death, that soul detaches from the body and migrates either upwards to eternal bliss or downwards to torment. That is a deeply Greek, Platonic philosophy. It is not a first-century Jewish one. Over the centuries, that pagan framework merged with wildly popular poetic works, most notably Dante's Inferno. The Western Church adopted this highly specific, layered geography of the afterlife as literal truth. This artistic vision slowly but completely replaced the actual biblical narrative, which focuses entirely on a future where heaven and earth are eventually united, not abandoned. Holding on to that Greek and medieval framework makes it impossible to understand the actual crisis Jesus was addressing in his teachings. When you read English translations of the teachings of Jesus, you will see the word hell, but the actual Greek word Jesus used in those moments was Gehenna. Gehenna is a literal, physical place. Specifically, it is the Valley of Hinnom, located just outside the ancient city walls of Jerusalem. In ancient Israel, this valley had a notoriously dark history. It was a site where corrupt kings practiced child sacrifice to Canaanite gods, and it eventually became the city's smoldering trash dump, a place where ruined, discarded things were thrown away. Jesus leveraged his audience's visceral familiarity with this landscape to create a devastating metaphor for waste and self-destruction. His warnings about Gehenna pointed toward the tragic disintegration of human life that happens when we separate ourselves from our source. To see exactly what that disintegration looks like, we can look at Jesus' parable of the Rich Man and Lazarus. It serves as the ultimate character study of a soul in ruin. In the story, a crippled beggar named Lazarus sits ignored at the gate of a wealthy man. Notice that the beggar has a name, but the rich man does not. He has entirely lost his identity to his wealth and his status. Without them, he is essentially a non-person. Both men die, and the rich man finds himself in a place of torment. But his behavior there is baffling. He never asks to leave. He shows zero remorse for how he lived. Instead, he complains, he shifts the blame to God, and he continues to treat Lazarus like an errand boy. The rich man's suffering is the logical, eternal continuation of a life completely turned inward on itself. Authors like C.S. Lewis pointed out that hell is less a location you are sent to and more a trajectory that you choose. We can visualize humanity like this prism. Humans act as mirrors. We are designed to receive the Creator's goodness and reflect it outward. When a human chooses to worship themselves instead of the Creator, the reflection fractures and the mirror darkens and corrodes. Hell is a self-inflicted shrinking of humanity. It is the tragic end result of a person insisting on their own autonomy, a choice that God ultimately honors when someone refuses to be an image bearer. The Book of James identifies hell as a force active in the present, specifically when human actions like destructive speech or character assassination are unleashed to tear others down. We see hell unleashed on earth today through exploitation, violence, and the pride that treats other humans as products or obstacles. Jesus confronted these effects of hell directly, spending his ministry reversing the rot of sickness, social isolation, and spiritual oppression.
On the cross, he allowed the full trajectory of human evil to overwhelm him, absorbing its power to create a clean space for a new kind of life.
Confronting the deep-seated pride or rage that fuels this cycle is rarely easy. It requires stripping away the very things we've used to build our false identities, a process that feels like surgery because it targets the parts of our character we've allowed to rot. According to the Bible, the ultimate goal is heaven and earth fully reuniting into one restored space. Here, hell has a specific place. The ruined fragments that refuse to be healed are contained outside the city. God doesn't force everyone inside. Because genuine love requires free will, hell stands as a tragic monument to human autonomy and dignity. Jesus invites his listeners to abandon the path of disintegration and rediscover the dignity of reflecting the Creator into the world.